願いします。
And you don't have to mute people. So, one of the nice things about Aikido is that it's not Koryu. So, it's a living, breathing art. But that puts an onus on all of us. We have to actually change and redefine the art, make it grow. So, the question becomes, how do you do that? Something that my instructor was really good at was finding inspiration in pretty much anything. If he saw a movie, it inspired him and he changed his Aikido. If he read a book, it changed his Aikido. Walks down the street, sees something, he integrates it and changes his Aikido. So one of the questions is, how do you do that? So that Aikido as a whole gets better and our own training gets a lot better. So we're going to use a bunch of random objects, or some random objects around us, and we're going to try and figure out how to change our Aikido based on that. So I'm not cooking the books too much. There are a bunch of random objects. If somebody could tell me one to use. Anybody? The chain? Okay. So, getting inspiration from things, for him, it came partially from always thinking about Aikido. So if you're always thinking about Aikido, obviously anything you look at or do affects your Aikido because it's one of the high points of your life. For us, we're going to practice it a little bit. So everybody get a random object from around you. It can be anything. It shouldn't be what I have. Give you guys a second to get something. What you want to do, take the object, look at it, move it around a little bit, see how it moves, how it changes. You can use two hands to hold it, you can use one hand to hold it, you can put it on parts of your body, you can let it fall, see how it falls. Look at it and try and figure out something that's interesting about it. Anything that's interesting about it. It doesn't matter. And if you pick up the same objects again later, what's interesting might change. Hopefully it changes, because you're in a different spot in your life. You can let it hit you, you can do whatever. So, yeah, let me give you a minute to play with your object, and then we'll move on. So for me, with a chain, there are a lot of interesting things. I could focus on how the links interact with each other. There's a weight at the very end when it falls that pulls on the body a little bit. I could work on that. The way it hangs is interesting. But what I'm going to look at right now, when it wraps, like when I hit something, it wraps around it. And I find that interesting. So you take that feeling that you see. So you see it wrap. Even when it goes, just falls, it wraps around it. And we go to a technique. Might as well start at Ikkyo since it's the first, right? And you think about the technique of Ikkyo, the standard boom, boom. But now I'm interested about how the chain wraps. So what if I wrap my first arm while I do it? What does that do to my Ikkyo? What if I wrap the other arm? How would it change my Ikkyo? Obviously, this would be easier with another person, but we don't have it, so we practice as best we can. You can also do it with any motion that you do. When you step, can you get your leg to wrap a little? So it changes how you walk. If you're doing weightlifting, can you wrap your arms around the weight as you pick it up? You can apply it to everything. So whatever you found interesting with the object that you had, apply it to your Ikkyo now. Like, find a way to apply that idea, that feeling to it. And if doing Ikkyo is too abstract for you right now because you don't have another person, you can take another motion. That's fine. And mote or ura doesn't really matter. The idea is to change something you're doing. Of course, ideally, while you're doing it, it's changing and growing also, and adapting. So your first idea might change. Like mine, it's wrapping around, my arm wraps around, then it wraps around my back to the other arm that also wraps, which is different than just wrapping one arm to the other. Now it goes completely through the body. Why? Because it's more interesting than just one. And you can go down to the pin, you can stay standing, it doesn't really matter. So now the next step would be to take that same concept and apply it to another technique. So I could do Kotegaeshi. If they come in for a ski, I can wrap around the side and then wrap my arms back to throw. For the concept I'm working on. Each of you are working on a different concept. So you take that and try and apply this new idea to a different set of motions. And if you weren't doing technique, you were just walking, you could go to do a push-up and change how you do your push-up, a squat, sit-up, sitting down, all of it. Anything that you do can be changed. Because it really is just study of motion. Alright, so now find another random object. I have a hand weight. And you do the same process. Play around with it, see what it does, how it feels, and find anything about it that is interesting to you. I'm cheating a little bit because I've been playing around with this for a while, like the past few days or so. Play with it a little bit, see what you get. For me, what I'm finding interesting with this is the way it hits my whole body when I catch it. And my whole body drops a little. So you can then take that idea and exaggerate it. And think about now, go back to Ikkyo and how do you apply that to Ikkyo? So for me, they hit and I sink. Or I can move forward and drop. That same kind of drop to them. Like there are different ways to apply the same concept. So play with that concept that you just found a little bit. And we'll build on it. Then once you're comfortable with your new concept, combine the two that you just figured out. So if I drop and then do the chain, the wrapping, right? Or can I wrap while dropping? Can I use the drop to create the wrap that I'm trying to do? And you play with all these different variations until you find something that changes how you do Aikido. And you vary it as much as possible. Until you find something else that's interesting with it. Like, if I'm receiving it and dropping, while doing it, I can use the receive as the drop and change my body to wrap at the same time. So you end up with something completely new that wasn't what you were looking for. And then, sorry, I'm running through this pretty quick, but as you're practicing this, try and make it smaller and smaller also. So with the drop in the chain, it ends up being much smaller. Because application, I can't do this big motion. It takes too long. So instead, it would be small. And when you get tired of one technique, move on to another technique. There's no real set limit for when you have to change. I would recommend not spending massive amounts of time on anything because you'll become obsessed, but change when you lose interest. And depending on your personality, you could go Ikkyo, Nikkyo, Sankyo, Yankyo, then onto the lyrics. Or you could jump around between techniques. Doesn't matter, you're just trying to find a concept and find a way for it to apply to everything that you do. Because any idea that's worth anything changes more than just one technique. And then the next phase would be adding additional constraints. So the wrapping and the drop. What if the person's knees are bad? How do I change it so it doesn't go to the knees? What if they only have one arm? Can I still do what I'm trying to do? What if I'm in a confined space and I can't move forward or back? Can I still make the motion work? The idea, the concept. And you build more and more constraints on top of it until you better understand the whole idea. And then you do it, you work on an idea for a month or less and scrap it. Move on to something else. You can always come back to it. It's not like you forget it. And if you can't think of constraints, then just make it more difficult. Get something unstable to stand on, or do what you're trying to do with one leg. Put yourself in, if you think Swariwaza would be difficult to do it, Swariwaza. If you think it would be difficult to do while holding a push-up, you find a way to do it while holding a push-up. Anything to make it more difficult so you better understand it and find new things. And yeah, then of course repeat the process over and over again. And it becomes really easy to come up with new ideas to work on something then. And it should be that everything you see around you inspires you, gives you a new thing to work with, new thing to work on, because all of it, you interact with everything, so it's all physical motion. So, if everybody could come back, and I'm curious, what did people find as far as what they were using? What new concepts or ideas? And anybody who wants to share can share, because it'll help everybody else. Obrigado pela visão. Thank you all.